Hello. Hi. It's good to be here today. Nice to see you all. It looks like a bunch of people are already here. So fun. Yay. Hello, everybody. Let's see who's here. Let's see. Bonnie Davis, Emily Beaton from Pennsylvania. Bonnie Davis is from Maryland. Kelly, my cat, from New Hampshire. Fatima from Holland. Lee Yosol from Korea. Hello, welcome to our group. Signa Williams from North Carolina. Anne Tremolles from France. Where are you in France? What town? Anne, can you say? And then Francoise, she's from Lyon, France. Sylvia Earle from Cameron Park. Manuela from Greenville, South Carolina. Renee from Atascadero. Margit from Germany. Nina. Joyce Nugent from Arlington, Virginia. Susan Day from Washington State. Susan McBride from Scottsdale, Arizona. I was just over that way a couple weeks ago. Katharina Continental Combined. Kathy Trakowska, she is from Melbourne, Australia. And she says it's daylight savings there. Downside 1 less hour of sleep, upside 1 less hour to wait for off the cuff. And then Jane from Arkansas. Michonne from Montreal. MS Nook Chile from Santiago, Chile. Cheryl Solster from Dover, Delaware. Julie from St. Joe, Missouri. J.L. Morgan from Fort Worth, Texas. Anne is from Vézelay. It's in Burgundy. I'm going to have to look that up on the map and see where you are. Dolise from Washington. Andy from Southern California, Arcadia. Lori Jane from Mexia, Texas. And Vera Van Syke from Somerville, South Carolina. You know, my son just moved to Texas this summer. He's living in Clear Lake Shores, which is just a little bit north of Kemah and south of Houston. And it's been pretty warm there, but he really likes it. Okay, so we also have Jane Sorensen from Vista, California. Diana Danko. Thank you, Diana. Elizabeth Nilsson from Sundbyberg, Sweden. Danielle from Montreal. Deborah Cisneros. And Grammy Luli and Grana Boo 3 from Paso Robles. Oh, you'll have to get in touch with Renee. Both of you live close together. She's just in Atascadero. And RSB Design, she's Rachel from Houston, Texas, just north of my son. Okay, so hello, everybody. I know it's been a long time. I had a health issue, a mental health issue. I'm not crazy. But I had an episode of, a long episode of pretty severe anxiety and depression, and finally got a grip on that, changing my medications around and stuff. And it takes so long to get better, but I am feeling better. It was really horrible for quite some time. I never felt suicidal or like hurting myself. I just didn't feel like getting out of bed and spent most of my time in bed. I didn't knit, I didn't read, I really didn't do much of anything. But I am feeling better. And I know a lot of other people have suffered from this as well. So I don't feel, I'm not embarrassed to talk about it because it's real. It really happened to me. Dysfunctional. Thank goodness for my husband that he cooks and takes care of everything, because I probably would have starved to death otherwise, because I just didn't feel like doing anything at all. But here I am, we're back, and I'm so glad to see you. And going forward, hopefully we continue on the same path that we were on before. I do have some things to share. I have a book I wanted to share with you, a new book. And when I first started feeling better, which was towards maybe about the middle of September, I just started feeling like I could, go to one of my knitting groups. I went just for a little while each time, maybe half an hour or an hour, because it got overwhelming very quickly. but I'm getting better. But during that time, I thought, I need to get some inspiration for my knitting. So I was looking at on Amazon at any of the new knitting books that had come out, and I saw this one. Traditional Danish Sweaters by Vivian Høxbro. Now, you may have heard of Vivian Høxbro. She also wrote shadow knitting and domino knitting. So those are her other books. I don't have them in here to show you. I have them somewhere. I looked for them. I couldn't find them because I wanted to show them to you. I know I have them. This book is awesome. I got it because of her name. I knew it was going to be a good book. But when I got it, and I've already looked through it every single page, first of all, I love the sweater designs. It's something that I could knit for myself, but also it's a typical knitting book. It starts out with the history of knitting. It talks about the Danish sweater history of knitting, and she shows examples of traditional Danish museum pieces so that you can see what they've looked like. But then she has a technique section, knitting techniques. And she starts right out by showing the standard long tail cast on, starting with a slip knot, which is how most people are taught. And then she shows how to do it without making the slip knot, which is how I put my first stitches on. And I'd never seen this in a book before. So it was really, really cool to see this in a book. Then on the very next page, something else I've never seen in a book, she explains the difference between the long tail cast on, and she breaks it down to what it really is, in that it's a series of loops just going around the needle, connected at the bottom. So she has the long tail cast on here. Then this is a completely separate cast on down here. This she did the standard long tail cast on. Down here, she just wrapped the yarn around the needle, and then she knitted it. And when you wrap the yarn around the needle and then knit it, it looks exactly the same as the long tail cast on. This is not the backward loop or thumb loop cast on. This is just simply wrapping the yarn around the needle like this, just taking the yarn and going around the needle and then knitting that. I have a video on that, by the way. That's one of the techniques that you can use for starting toe-up socks. Anyway, I knew about that. And it's one of the things that Charles Gandy and I used to talk about all the time, because a lot of people think that the long tail cast on is a combination of the backward loop, cast on, and knitting, and it's not. It's just wrapping the yarn around the needle and then knitting it. That gives you the exact same thing as a long tail cast on. So what this teaches you is that yarn that's going around, let me get some yarn out here. It's probably attached to something. Here we go. Where is the tail? Here it is. Okay, so the part that goes around the needle, you know how I'm always talking about how to make your cast on so it's not too tight, the long tail cast on so it's not too tight. The finger yarn is the part that goes around the needle in the long tail cast on, like this. And the thumb yarn is the one that connects the loops together across the bottom. And I've shown you that before, and I have an extensive video on about that. So this is looking at it from a different angle, and I really liked that. You know, if I get one good tidbit out of a book, I'm thrilled. And I've gotten 2 out of this book just in those 2 pages. So I also love the designs of these sweaters. Also, a lot of times in books, when people show their knitting, it is not really fine work. This is fine work. You know, Arinda Holiday says the most difficult stitch to work perfectly in knitting is stockinette. If you have any tension issues, any differences between your knits and your purls, it will show up in stockinette stitch as unevenness. Look at this beautiful knitting here. The knitting in this book is perfect, not machine. But the finishing that she has in here on her sweaters Let me show you. And she has a whole section on the motifs for these. It's all basically knit and purl designs, but it's something, it just looks, they look so elegant. I have my yarn out, and I'm going to knit a sweater out of that yarn, which I'll talk about that yarn in a second. She has some really cool things in her motifs, how to make the lines perfect here. Do you see that? This is all very fine details that are show in the work. So in the sweaters themselves, she has quite a few sweaters in here, actual patterns for them. So you could just follow one of those if you wanted. Look at this one. Isn't that beautiful? But what's pretty is the edges and the finishing. Look here, here's the split side. Look how nice that is here. Look, this part right here, how it just flows right into each side. It's that type of stuff that just turns me on. I just get so excited about it. But in the back of the book, which is really cool, is she tells you how to make your own sweater without a pattern. So if you like some of the things in here, but you don't want to do a particular pattern in here, she tells you, whoops, hold on, there's somebody at my door.
Hello, ma'am. How are you doing today?
I'm right in the middle of a conference. I can't talk right now. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Sorry about that. Okay, so I wanted to show you in the back of this book where she teaches you how to knit your own sweater. And she walks you through all the things that I show you in the knit-alongs that we do, is making a schematic, measuring your body, making a schematic, picking your stitch patterns, making gauge swatches, figuring out your gauge and how it's going to fit in the area. She also has a whole section on terms and symbols and Danish clothing terms. So that's an awesome book. Traditional Danish Sweaters. Probably this is going to move into my top 5 favorite books of all time. I just really, really like this. So I'll tell you a little bit about this yarn. This is Wollmeise Lace Garn, Wollmeise Lace Garn. Light, you can't see it very good. It's upside down. Wollmeise Lace Garn. There, you can see it. Okay, and this is one skein. In this skein weighs 300 grams, and it has a total of 1,722 yards, or that would be 1,050 meters in this one skein. I didn't look it up, the current price on Wollmeise, but it's a lot less than buying a sweater's quantity worth of yarn in multiple skeins, and this is enough for a sweater. In fact, the sweater that I'm wearing, the solid blue, is the Lacegarn. It is a lace weight yarn. I have a little sample here somewhere I pulled out to share. Of course, it's disappeared. This is a piece off of a current sweater that I'm knitting. This is the weight of the yarn. You can see it's heavier than lace weight. It's like a light fingering. She calls it lace weight, but it's like a light fingering. It's 100% merino superwash wool, and it's perfect. So this is another sweater that I'm knitting with. It hasn't been blocked, and I've got to do the second sleeve. I've got one sleeve here. One sleeve. And it's the same style as this. It's a big boxy, but this one has a different neck and a different pattern on the bottom. In fact, the one I'm wearing is called A Hint of Summer, and that is the pattern is by Isabel Kramer. It's called A Hint of Summer. And the one that I'm just knitting, that I'm working on, I'm looking at these on Ravelry on my computer, is called Olive Leaf Pullover by Ririco. And it has a design down at the bottom. This hasn't been blocked, so it's really kind of hard to see it, but it's a 1/1 cables, a gazillion of them to make this pattern at the bottom and down the sleeve and on the cuff. So this is out of this same yarn, the Wollmeise Lace Garn. It is light. So, and I used a 5 needle, US 5 needle on this. So it's not, you can, it's a little bit sheer, but you can't see through it. Obviously, you can't see my skin through this. But for where I live, this is really nice sweater yarn because we don't get a chance to wear sweaters much here in Bakersfield. It doesn't, we only get maybe 2 or 3 days a year or nights where it actually gets below freezing. And we rarely wear coats, but we do get to wear sweaters in the wintertime. Indoors, it's hard to wear a sweater because it just isn't that cold. But the Lacegarn, it's good. So, upcoming project in this pretty, I love this color. My friend Binka gave it to me. And she lives in Carefree, just northeast of Scottsdale. And she is a master knitter also. I went over and visited her when I was starting to feel better. I actually drove over there and visited her for a few days a couple of weeks ago, and we both started the sweater together. We're doing a knit along, so that helps me. Okay, so now talking about the cable pillow that we were working on. I am getting back to that. I know I left you all hanging. I'm sorry. This is my front. And so I've got to make the videos on doing the embroidery and then the video on seaming the 4 pieces together on the back and doing the I-cord joining. And I think you'll really enjoy those. It's a lot of fun to do those. Yeah, don't forget thumbs up. Thumbs up. So we'll get back to that. I'm going to get back to that probably within the next week. So you'll start hearing more about that. And we talk a lot about that over on my Ravelry group, Knitting with Suzanne Bryan, but we also talk about it in my Facebook group, which is also called Knitting with Suzanne Bryan. If this is your first time joining me live here, this is in conjunction with all my other social media. It's just one aspect of it. So everything comes together. So there's a lot of written things that I do on Facebook and Ravelry. I have the tutorials and patterns, plus the live streams and YouTube videos. I have a separate YouTube channel called Knitting with Suzanne Bryan, or Knitting Suzanne. It's Knitting with Suzanne Bryan. And that I have the individual videos that are tutorials. This channel is called Suzanne Off the Cuff, and this is specifically just for my live streams. And so I kind of took a little vacation over the summer. So let's see, there's some questions on Ravelry that people have asked recently that I want to answer. So I'm going to go over there. And this was asked on July 23rd, and I'm sorry for such a long delay. Will 100% wool or wool blends always go back to their original blocked size when reblocked to the same dimensions at a later time? What about other fibers? And this is from Sarah Fran. Now, what we learned in this pillow tutorial is that the 100% wool and probably wool blends that are at least 50% wool will most likely go back to the shape that they want to be, not necessarily the blocked shape. If you block your piece, if you stretch it at all while it's wet, once it's dry, eventually it'll pull back into the shape that it wanted to be before you stretched it. We all learned that, right? That was one of the things that I was teaching you in the pillow knit along. I had everyone stretch their swatches when they block them and then let them relax and see what they went back to. So if the fiber has at least 50% wool, that's probably how it will act. Now, I'm talking about superwash wool right now. I can't say for sure what non-superwash wool will do. I'm in the process of doing an experiment with that. I have a bunch of swatches knit up with superwash wool and non-superwash wool, the exact same yarn from the same company, one superwash, non-superwash, and I'm going to do a variety of things to those swatches and compare them. And I will report back to you. It'll probably be a blog post rather than videos, because I think it's something easier just to show a series of pictures and what happened to the swatches. So I'll be able to fill you in a lot more on the what non-superwash wool does. I will tell you, though, I did do an experiment with the swatches, which I can't find. I had them out here. Wonder what I did with them. For this sweater right here, I did an experiment with, I did a couple of swatches for that. And one of them is the cable design. So I did a little swatch in the round of the cable design. And I soaked it in water for 30 minutes. Then I wrung it out, rolled it in a towel, carefully laid it out without stretching it, and let it dry. And then I carried it around to my different things and messed with it quite a bit. So I wanted to make sure that that was the gauge I was going to get. And then I photocopied it. So I got a picture exactly of what it was. So then I took that same swatch and I put it back in the water and let it sit for 30 minutes. And then while it was in the water, I stretched it every way and really agitated it and moved it around and pulled on it. I took it out while it was still dripping wet. I pulled it in every direction. Then I rolled it in a towel. Then I pulled it in every direction. I just laid it down and let it dry. Guess what? It turned out exactly the same. Exactly the same. I compared it to the photocopy. No change whatsoever. So that's an interesting thing. I'm going to be doing some more experimenting like that and seeing, and this is superwash wool. In fact, it's the Wollmeise Lace Garn wool that I did that with. I'll try some other yarns also and do the same thing. I'll make multiple identical swatches and do some testing on it. I think that's very interesting. Okay, that was that one question led into all that. The next one is from iMargaret73. She said, I noticed my swatches changed a lot after soaking and blocking. My swatches for the cable knit along shrank to gauge. Is there any value to pre-washing or pre-soaking skeins of yarn? I know from spinning my own yarns that things can change drastically after a wash. I was surprised a commercial yarn changed so much though. Well, commercial yarns are blocked after they're spun. So it's already been through all of that. That's part of the production of yarn, is you spin the yarn and then you block the yarn, you set it in the spin. It's like blocking. I don't think that retreating your yarn will make any difference. I think it's just part of this process that we're talking about, that the stitches will be the size that you created them to be, even if when it's wet, they seem to get bigger. When it dries, they will go back to the shape that you knitted them to be. Okay, this is from Susie Maloney. She says, question, for block 3 in the intarsia, this is the cable pillow, we knit the two cables together from the wrong side and bind off on the right side, right? Yes, this is the swatch she's talking about right here. So when you come up to the top, these little cables, the extra stitches, the cable flare compensation that I've taught you all about, you do the bind off on the wrong, you knit them together on the wrong side, which means they're going to be purled together or an SSP. And then on the right side, you do the bind off. This is the swatch she's talking about. Okay, we'll move right along here, and then I'll come over to the side and look at the chat and see what you guys are asking. Remember, if you're going to ask me a question, to put it in all caps, please. This is from Julie LD. Question, how would you block a jumper or cardigan that you add lace to? Perhaps a lace band next to a button band, or the bottom of a jumper, or around a yoke. When adding lace, would you use the same size needle? Now, if it's knitted in, like in a yoke or in a portion of the sweater, you're of course going to use the same size needle that you're using for the rest of the sweater. Well, I'm not going to agree with that. I disagree with that. If it's the yoke, you may use a different size needle, and I have done that. It depends on what's happening in the lace. For example, in my Zweig sweater, part of the lace has a lot of yarn overs, and another part of the lace has yarn overs, but it also has twisted stitches. And you know, when you use twisted stitches, it pulls the work in, right? It tightens it from side to side. So I used a smaller needle for the part that was a lot of yarn overs with normal stitches, and then went up a needle size for the part that had the twisted stitches because it was below, and I didn't want this part being poofy up here too big to match the lower part. This you will learn whether you need to do this by doing gauge swatches in advance. Just like for this sweater here, and I know I got the gauge swatches out. I cannot. As soon as I turn this video off, I'll find them. I know I will. They're in here somewhere. I did 2 swatches. I did one just for the plain stockinette portion, and I did one for the stitch pattern portion, which you can't see very well. Once it's blocked, I'll wear it once it's blocked so you'll see it. And I did both those swatches in advance. Now, a lot of people, I've seen people make comments on Facebook and on Ravelry in my groups and in other groups. They'll say they have a really hard time swatching before starting a sweater because they want to just jump right into the sweater. And I don't blame them. When I want to start a new project, I want to just jump right in too. What I do though to counteract that, I'll tell you, when I was had less money to deal with, I only bought enough yarn for one project at a time because I couldn't afford to buy more. And so I would work that project till it's completed, and then I would look for the next project and save up my money and buy the yarn for it. Once I could afford to have more than one project going on at a time, and I like to knit, I've always liked to knit sweaters. The Amber Shiwi says it's pronounced Sveg. Sveg, not Zweig, branch. Sveg. Okay. While I'm knitting, like for example, this sweater, I have one sleeve left to do. The next sweater I know is going to be out of this. So what I will probably do is start swatching this, just getting my gauge swatches done before I actually finish this. So this is where, if I go to social knitting or something like that, and I need mindless knitting, I'll do my gauge swatches. And then I block them. And then I carry them around with me while I'm finishing up this. So when this is done, I can jump right into this. That's how I manage gauge swatches. Because otherwise, if I finish this completely and I'm done, I have to do a gauge swatch and then I have to wait for it to dry. And I have to carry it around with me for a few days because I don't do my gauge right off of a fresh swatch. I have to carry it around for several days. I get much better, reliable gauge that way. So I would have this several days lag between projects. Now, of course, I have other projects too, like socks and things like that. But if I just had these two, I would get this swatch done and blocked and dry and carrying it around while I'm finishing this. That way I can go right over to this as soon as I'm done. That's how I deal with that. But the gauge swatch, I think doing the gauge swatches is the most important part of any project where the gauge is important. Okay, this is from Alvarez 10. Question, Suzanne, I hope I did this right this time. I think I made a mistake on the cardigan sweater by increasing one stitch at the V-neck increases on both sides. I do not want to undo my work now that I did it right for a chance. Could I just put 2 together? Yes, you can just knit 2 together. In that case, you're 1 stitch off. Just knit 2 together. Nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to know. It's probably when you pick up the stitches along the edge to do the button band or collar, it'll be invisible. Good plan. You're thinking correctly. Okay, this one is from Moonrocker. Follow from item 246 in last week's live stream about long tail cast on, please. Here in the UK, we don't have a craft yarn council as far as I know. Okay, Craft Yarn Council is only an online organization, so all you have to do is in your search bar type in Craft Yarn Council with no spaces between the words, just craftyarncouncil.com, and it'll come up. So you can look that up. And then she says, although I rarely use a closed cast on these days, mostly, and I think she means long tail cast on by that, mostly I do a provisional and knit outwards from it. The closed cast on I do is how to cast on the thumb method. This seems to be the same as the long tail, and yes, it is. So there's 2 ways to do the long tail cast on. One is, have your tail, and the tail goes over the thumb. The working yarn goes over the finger, and you use both of these to do your cast on. Everybody knows how to do that's the standard way to do a long tail cast on. But you can also do it like this. So you would, let me get couple stitches on here. So you just have the thumb like this. You don't hold, you just have the thumb like this over the thumb. You put the yarn through, and you, with this hand, you throw the yarn over the needle. I was off the screen, I'm sorry. So you make a backward loop with the thumb, you put the needle through it, you throw the yarn around the needle, pull the stitch through the backward thumb. This is exact same thing as the long tail cast on. It's just another way to do it. It produces the exact same thing. It's the same structure. Okay? That's what she's talking about. So that's fine. And this is from Nona Joan. Do you have a video showing how to graft a 3-stitch I-cord edge, which is knit as part of the fabric of a long rectangular scarf that is joined to form a cowl? I do not, but I have a whole series of videos planned for I-cord, and that's one of them, is grafting the 2 ends of the I-cord together. Okay? And so that will come up, but it probably won't be till around Christmas or the first of the year. This is from Nona Joan. Again, I'm working on a charity project, which is the Preemie Surprise Baby Surprise Jacket. The pattern calls for make one. Which one would you recommend? A lot of times, this is an excellent question. A lot of times patterns will just say make one, and they won't tell you whether it's a make one right or a make one left. The way I decide is I always make it so it's leaning away from either a seam line or a faux seam line or an edge. So let's say this is the front of the cardigan and you need to make one stitch in. I make it so it's leaning away. So it's going this way, away from the edge. If it's a raglan seam line, like right here, this one would lean this way, this one would lean this way. So they lean away from the dividing point. Okay, that's the way they look the best. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, it is personal preference. This is from Julianne 2. I saw that video suspended for health. Take care of yourself. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is from KMCW. This is so cute. I loved reading this. She liked my new haircut, and when she went and got her haircut, she got it cut real short. And now she needs to make a new rabbiter. Okay. This is from Sandy Bean. She said, I didn't like the way my sweater was going, so I cut off the part I didn't like, and everything is just fine. That's great. I love that. Okay, now this is just the recent. So this is from Anne Tremolier's, and she asked, I would like to know if there's any advantage to knit back and forth when knitting a sweater. I feel it must be more durable than the one knitted in the round. That is such a good question. So she's talking about knitting a sweater in pieces and seaming them versus knitting in the round. Now this is knit in the round. There's no seams, although I put a faux seam in there. See that? That's a purl column right down there. So that's called a faux seam. It adds nothing to the structure. It's just for looks. Okay. Some people believe that seamed garments are more structurally sound. It depends on what you're knitting. If it's something that is more heavy, like a coat or something like that, or an Aran sweater or something that's out of a heavier yarn, seaming will keep the sides more in line. It's more structured. But as I said, it depends on the design. Like this is a real loose, casual. It doesn't need seams. It's supposed to be just really, really casual. But if it's something that is more couture and has a specific shape, seaming will hold the shape better. That's an excellent question. This is from iMargaret73. She says, is bust shaping the same in all types of sweaters, or does it change depending on the particular design of the sweater? I would love more in-depth discussion and videos on the techniques for shaping sweaters fabric to fit correctly. Maybe it's in your videos and I just haven't found the information and absorbed it all yet. I refer to bust shaping in some of my videos, but I do not have any videos specifically on bust shaping. But I will tell you the best book that I think that it talks about best shaping is the one by Isolde Teague. And I have it right up here somewhere. This one right here. Little Red in the City. And she talks about bust shaping in here and how to figure it out and how to figure out whether you need bust shaping and how to put it in your sweater. This is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. I think it comes in an ebook. So here she talks about the different types of bust shaping. So you can have under bust shaping, or you can have side darts. You can shape from up here, you can shape from here, or you can shape down here. You can use a combination of those if you want. It depends on your body and the shaping that you want to get. So this, in my opinion, is the best book on bust shaping, and understandable and easy to interpret and use. Whoops. Okay. I'm almost done with the Ravelry questions, then I'll come over here. This one is, whoops, what happened? I'm still here. There, I lost myself for a minute. This is from Knitty Girl. This is Diana Denko. Hi, Suzanne. Just want to brag a bit. Oh, this is so awesome. This just made my day, because the ITAG cardigan that you designed gave me my first best of show ribbon for knitting. I've been trying to win one of those for years. The show judge complimented my technique. Made my year too. That is so, so awesome. Okay, this is from Crispy Quilts. I have been playing around with entralac and have been practicing purling back with the right side facing me. I find that the left leg of those stitches tend to be shorter than the right leg. I'm a little confused because in entralac, unless are you doing it in garter stitch? If you're doing it in garter stitch, you would purl back. But if you're doing it in stockinette, you would knit back. And I'm not sure whether you purled back or knit back. I made a little swatch here on the other needle. Here it is. This is a little swatch I was practicing on, because you said that your left leg is shorter than the right leg, and you knit continental like I do. So I tried it on my swatch, and the legs of the stitches are all the same size. I know how to knit backwards. It's not my favorite thing to do. It slows me down. I just turn and purl back. But if you're purling backwards, I didn't try that. Let me try that. You'll see me fumble around here. Okay, so if we're purling, if we purl backwards, we're going to have to go like... No, I'm not going to do it right now. I can't think about that. Okay. It's beyond my imagination at the moment. I've done it before, and I find that when I purl backwards, my purl stitches are too tight, and I don't like doing that. Knitting backwards, I don't have any problem at all, but purling backwards, my purl stitches are too tight, even though superior, more knowledgeable people will tell you that the purl stitches are always larger. I will tell you that is not true, because my purl stitches get smaller, and I've always had a problem with my purl stitches being smaller. It is possible to have smaller purls. I'm telling you that. So when people give you absolutes, don't always believe them, okay? Try it for yourself. This is from Fiddle Beads, and she wanted to know, she wants to do this cast on that's in June Hyatt's Principles of Knitting, and it is called Stranded Cast On. And so I've got my book out here, and I looked it up. It's on page 55, and I think that she's thinking that there's a thumb yarn and a finger yarn. There is a thumb yarn, but it's not like long tail cast on, and it's the finger yarn that is going to be going around the needle. The thumb yarn is just going to go across the bottom. I have a video that does demonstrate that, and it's called Provisional Cast On Over a Cable Needle. And in that video, I use the cable needle as the thumb yarn. So the yarn is going over the needle and over the cable, and it gives you this provisional along this bottom. If you used a strand of yarn instead of the cable needle, you would get this exact same cast on that June Himman shows as the basic stranded cast on. So Fiddle Beads, if you want to go look at that video, it's the provisional cast on over a cable needle, it might clear it up a little bit. And I'll add this to my video list. Let me write it down. This is provisional cast on over yarn instead of the cable needle. I'll make a video of that. It is not a long tail cast on, and it has nothing to do with a long tail cast on, and it is used as a provisional cast on, so it would not be an edge of your knitting. Okay, so we're done with the Ravelry questions. Let's go and look over here and see what we got. So right now we have 106 people on here, and there are 49 thumbs up. Is everybody a subscriber? Have you all subscribed to my channel? If you haven't, be sure to subscribe. Okay, let me look for the questions. Remember, all caps. Okay. You guys are a chatty group. It's fun. Okay. Vera Van Syke said Turkish cast on for one needle. Exactly. When you take the yarn and you just wrap it around, a Turkish cast on is where you take 2 needles and you just wrap the yarn around like this. And that is a doable cast on for toe-up socks. It creates a double-sided edge so you can knit this way and knit this way for toes. It's easier than Judy's Magic cast on if you can't remember how to do that. Okay. Carolyn, hello, Carolyn. Nice to see you too. Okay, Anne Tremolliers. Question, Suzanne, you talked about tension issue. I looked at stockinette in back and forth. My before last column is not good. It seems to have one big one, small one, big one. Yes, that's uneven tension at the edge. Now, different people call uneven tension different things. Some people call it gutters. Some people call it rowing out. I call gutters is when you have uneven tension across the whole row. And so it looks like corrugated cardboard. Okay, so you have a row of big stitches, a row of small stitches, a row of big stitches, a row of small stitches. When you're first knitting, you may not even notice it because you don't know how to read your knitting yet. So until someone points it out to you, you probably don't know that you have that problem. When you just have on not the last stitch, not the edge stitches, but one stitch in from either side, it can be the right side or the left side. If you have a big stitch, a little stitch going up this way, big, little, big, little, big, little, I call that rowing out. And I have a video and a blog post on that. It's called Enlarge Last Bind Off Stitch. And it's the same problem that causes an enlarged last bind off stitch. And I show you how to identify it and how to fix it in that video. That's an excellent question. This is from Johnny Perkins. She said, hi, Suzanne, just finished my ITAG sweater. I learned so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's my favorite now, and I have the skills to make many more. Yay. I love it. It fits so good. Okay, Amber, just your first letter was off, so it was the sound of the German Z. You know, I have a hearing impediment, and so it's really hard for me to speak foreign languages because I don't hear all the individual little sounds that come out. So I just say what it sounds like to me, and sometimes that's not right. And MS Nook Chili said, oh, that's the cast on my mother taught me years ago. I think that's the alternate long tail cast on. Yes. Margot's out here. Oh my God, I love Margot to death. She says, hello, I'm late. And Amber says, hello, Margot, -3 house points. Oh my God, that's so funny. And Francoise says that's how her mom taught her grandmother taught her too. Okay, let's see. Congratulations. Question, I'm knitting a sweater coat with 100% wool. I like the yarn and the pattern, but the fuzz from the yarn is tough. Any suggestions to help with the fuzz coming from the yarn? That's a tough one. That's the yarn. And I don't know if there's anything that you can do about that. I don't know. It's just the yarn. Sorry. Deborah Cisneros, question. Would you please list the yarn company name of the yarn you showed after the live stream so we can look it up? Thank you. Yes, it's a Wollmeise. It's I'll put a link to it because you can buy this yarn at Loopy U. It's made in Germany. It's a one-woman business. Her name is Claudia. And she has a brick and mortar store in the town that she lives in Germany. And then she has an online store. And probably she sells most of her yarn through the online store. That is where I buy mine. I buy it from her directly in Germany. And her prices are very, very good. And even with the shipping, it's a good price. So, and you get the biggest selection that way. So you can go on there and check it out yourself. Okay. Anne says I'm a good addiction. Well, you guys are addicting to me too. I like it. Okay, so let's see. Priscilla Lopez says, I think my pearls are smaller too. Yep. And I think it happens with continental knitters. Priscilla, are you a continental knitter or are you a thrower? Oh, Frank, it's so nice to see you on here. Hello, I'm going to come to your workshop. Okay. This is a good question. This is Manuela. Does a change in gauge have an effect on the shape of your cables? Yes. Yes. And I don't know, maybe you could ask me a more specific question that, and I could help you a little bit more to see where you're coming from. Okay. Let me see. Did I miss anybody? Oh, question. This is Carol. Question. I'm thinking of doing a striped scarf in DK. Do I have to have edging around the DK? Also, how would I cast on? In double knitting, you're talking about double knitting, not in double knit size yarn, but in actual double knitting, right? Or are you talking about using DK weight yarn? Yep, Priscilla, I knew it. I think continental knitters are more likely to have the smaller purls and larger knits. I think that the majority of the big name instructors in the United States are throwers. I haven't been to a class yet where, oh, well, you know, the lady, the Russian lady, what's her name that teaches the lace? She's a continental knitter, but she's from Russia. So Carol, yes, double knitting. You do not have to have an edge on there at all if you don't want to. I just did my double knitting scarf and I used the Italian cast on and the Italian bind off. Let me go get it. It's in the other room. So on this, I just, worked regular edges. There's nothing. I did a slipped stitch edge, and you can Google that. And it makes just a plain edge, nothing fancy on the edge. So it just looks like knitting. And I use an Italian. This is the cast on edge, Italian cast on. It's makes it invisible. Just looks like the fabric just grows right. And then I use an Italian bind off. And that is exactly the same look as the Italian cast on. It just ends. There's no bind off edge. And so the whole scarf just looks like a double fabric. There's nothing, no edges, no beginning, no ending. That's how I like mine. You can do yours the way you want. But that's how I like mine. Okay? Okay, Fatima, question. If I knit a hem of a cardigan in corrugated, should I compensate later in stockinette stitch in order to keep the gauge? You may have to, yes. Of course, this is where you do gauge swatches in advance. So you would do a corrugated ribbing and measure your gauge. You can compensate by either changing the stitch count or changing the needle size. Okay, sometimes it works out perfect and you don't have to change anything. Okay? Kelly, I'm spending 2 pounds of roving. I'm looking forward to the next sweater. Yay. We're okay. I'll tell you about that. Remind me if I don't say anything. Sorry I'm late. I was blocking my sweater and time got away from me. Alistair Post-Gwyn is an expert on double knitting. Look up his videos, and he has someone doing the edges, okay? Okay. Now, the next sweater is going to be knit from the bottom up in pieces. So you can either do a cardigan or a pullover. If you do a pullover, you'll have 4 pieces, a front, a back, and 2 sleeves. If you do a cardigan, you'll have a right front, a left front, a back, and 2 sleeves. So you have 5 pieces. And we're going to knit it from the bottom up. So there will be seaming. So you'll learn all about seaming, and you'll be able to do, put any sort of stitch pattern in it you want. If you want to do cables, you can. If you want to make an Aran style, this is the exact shape of sweater that you would make for Aran style. We're not doing set-in sleeves on this sweater. That will be next time, okay? This is a drop shoulder, so it's square. And so there's no armhole shaping. I'll teach you how to measure your body, how to do your gauge swatches, how to draw your schematic. You're going to knit from your schematic. If you want to get Ann Budd's book on a sweater, it's called, this is what it's called, The Knitter's Handy Book of Sweater Patterns. These are all bottom up in here. Okay, if you want to get that, you can get that. And but you don't have to have it. I will teach you how to make a sweater that fits you just the way you want it to fit, without anything other than your needles and your yarn, ruler, and blocking, and paper and a pencil where you're going to draw a schematic. Okay. And we'll start it in November. But what we'll be doing in November is measuring our bodies, picking out some stitch patterns, doing some gauge swatches, drawing our schematic. We will not actually start knitting the sweater until after Christmas, okay? So that gives you time to look, because you're going to be looking in your stitch pattern books. You're going to be looking if you want to make an Aran sweater, and I'll talk about proportion of the cables and where they need to be placed, background stitches, all that kind of stuff. If you want to use another stitch pattern other than cables, you can use whatever you want. In fact, if you get this book, you could use some of these pretty stitches, the stitch patterns that she has in here, which would be very good. She has a lot to choose from in here. So that will start in November, but the knitting, the actual sweater knitting won't start until, okay, Carol and Corcoran's question, what is an Aran style? Aran, it's capital A-R-A-N. It's a style of knitting that is a traditional style that started in the early 1900s, like the 1920s, around in there. And it's from Northern Europe. And it's the ones where you see with the heavy cables. That's an Aran style sweater. And there's a traditional way to knit them. And then there's many non-traditional ways to knit them. A lot of people think that any sweater with cables in it is an Aran sweater. That is not true. It's just a cabled sweater. Aran is a style. It's drop shoulder. What we're going to do is an Aran style. If you add cables to it, it can be called an Aran style sweater. If you do other stitch patterns, it's not an Aran sweater, but it'll be the same construction as far as putting the sweater together. Okay? Okay. The book I just showed. Traditional Danish Sweaters by Vivian Høxbro. I love this book. And Deborah Cisneros says, question, do you have a video demonstrating Italian cast on and bind off? Yes, I do. I have several videos on Italian cast on and Italian bind off. And I like mine better than Sockmaticians, but you can look at Sockmaticians if you want, okay? And then let's see. Dolisa. Okay, anybody else have anything they want to say? We're almost to an hour here. This is my first time back. I think we did okay. Don't forget to give me thumbs up. Also, you can share this YouTube stream. Once it's finished, then it becomes a video on my YouTube channel, and you can watch it over and over. Diana Danko does the timestamps for me. So down below, in the description of the video will be, as soon as she has them done, which will probably be tomorrow, I'll paste them in there. And then you can just, if you want, look at a certain thing that I've talked about in this past hour, you can just click on the little time that she puts in. It'll take you to that part of the video. Also, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That helps me. YouTube really ranks you in their settings by how many subscribers you have. Right now, for this channel, I have about 1,600 subscribers, a very small number. My other channel, Knitting with Suzanne Bryan, I'm coming up on 50,000 subscribers. And on that channel, my goal is to get at least 100,000 subscribers. Once you get 100,000 subscribers, then YouTube considers you a confirmed YouTuber, and they start helping you to, they put your videos higher up in the list. When people are looking at another video, your videos will be ranked higher. So they kind of help advertise your videos. I do make money from this, not a lot. For example, right now I'm getting a little less than 200,000 views every 28 days on my videos. Not this channel, but my other channel. And from that, I make about $600. But that's a lot of work that I've done to earn that $600. I have over 300 YouTube technical knitting videos. So that's that. I want you to subscribe to my channel, share my videos with your friends. I do this to help people knit better, become better knitters. And so when you share it, it helps somebody else. That makes me feel good. Okay? So we'll see you next time. Oh, next week. We're doing this on Sunday instead of Saturday, and I have a great big issue. The issue is Google stopped having... You can't use Google Hangouts anymore. They discontinued it. And that's how I interviewed people. There are other ways to interview people. So I have a week to figure it out, because I'm interviewing Arinda Holiday, the CEO of the Knitting Guild Association. I'm interviewing her again next Sunday at 2 o'clock Pacific time, which is UTC 8 o'clock. And she's going to talk about that professional knitting certification program that the Knitting Guild Association just started. So if you are at all interested in that, she'll be able to tell you the difference between that and the Master Hand Knitting program, and you can ask her questions. But in the meantime, from between now and then, I have to figure out how the heck I'm going to be able to interview her and have her as a live stream, because they took away the method that I use. But I know there are other methods. I just need to figure it out. Okie dokie. We'll see you next time. Have fun and happy knitting. Bye-bye. It was good to be here.